Afternoon, everyone. Afternoon. 1 year in to Donald Trump's presidency, the verdict is clear. Donald Trump and Republican policies have been a complete and total failure, a disaster for the American people, and the American people know it. The cost of living is way up, and the quality of life of the American people is way down. And Republicans continue to be focused on all the wrong things. This week, the Republican focus has been on Greenland, Jack Smith, and Bill and Hillary Clinton. That's their focus this week. Not driving down the high cost of living for everyday Americans in an environment where there is an affordability crisis that is crushing working class folks, middle class folks, and the American people all across the country. House Democrats are going to continue our focus on making life better for the American people, on driving down the high cost of living, fixing our broken healthcare system, and cleaning up corruption wherever it is found. In the Congress, at the Supreme Court, and within the administration. The American people have clearly spoken as it relates to the failures of the Trump administration and Republican policies, particularly as it relates to the economy. Republicans need to wake up and stop trying to jam their extreme policies down the throats of the American people and work to actually get something done that is designed to make life better for everyday Americans. That's our job, and that's what Democrats will continue to be focused on. Lowering costs, fixing our broken healthcare system, and delivering a country that actually works for working class Americans. Question?
Leader Jeffries.
Mike.
You just spoke about the cost of living and Democrats focusing on affordability, healthcare, all of the issues that you've been talking about for months. Do you feel that with the funding bills, presumably crossing the finish line later on this afternoon, no must-pass bills on the horizon, that you all can get laser focused back on this issue without the context of the appropriations bills kind of taking up a lot of the oxygen on the Hill?
Well, it's definitely important that we fund the government in a way that's consistent with our values. And in terms of many of the pieces of legislation that will be before the House later on this afternoon, we believe that that has been achieved. Significant progress has been made as it relates to the labor H bill in terms of protecting the health, the safety, and the well-being of the American people. Increased funding as it relates to community health centers, PBM reform, protecting safety net hospitals all across the country from significant cuts that they may be facing otherwise. These are all modest steps in terms of progress that has been made for the American people, but certainly as we emerge from the appropriations process, perhaps this week in the House, next week in the Senate, there are still so many issues that will require the Congress's attention because of the damage that Republicans have done throughout their first year to the American people. This is a group of people, these extremist Republicans, who enacted the largest cut to Medicaid in American history. We want to reverse it. Republicans want to double and triple down on it. Hospitals, nursing homes, community-based health clinics are closing because of Republican rotten policies in their one big ugly bill. Those policies should be reversed. Republicans are doubling and tripling down on those policies. The Trump tariffs are costing everyday Americans thousands of dollars in additional expense per year. They need to be eradicated, either by the Congress or by the Supreme Court. But Donald Trump and Republicans are doubling and tripling down on tariffs that are making life more expensive for the American people. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done for the American people, including the Senate acting on legislation we passed in the House to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits.
You had full attendance today. I wanted to get your reaction on that. There's been a lot of conversation around attendance on both sides. What's your reaction to the fact that all of your members are here?
These are incredibly important issues that we are confronting on behalf of the American people, and we are going to continue to press for full and complete attendance as we move forward, understanding that sometimes the challenges of life, particularly as it relates to medical situations or family situations, may result in a member or two missing a vote or two. But under the leadership of Catherine Clark, our Democratic whip, we're working hard to make sure as we move forward, it's all hands on deck here in the House of Representatives.
Jeffries, have you determined yet if you're going to launch a probe into Kristi Noem and what that would look like?
We haven't ruled anything in and we haven't ruled anything out, but what is clear is that Kristi Noem is a corrupt political hack who is deeply unqualified and is unleashing brutality using taxpayer dollars on the American people. ICE is out of control and operating in far too many ways in a lawless fashion, and the American people know it, which is why the American people have turned against Donald Trump and his extreme immigration policies. So once we get through the appropriations process, which is what is in front of us right now, we'll continue to have conversations, particularly with the leaders of the relevant committees, Benny Thompson, Robert Garcia, and Jamie Raskin, about what accountability can look like so that the American people actually have their taxpayer dollars spent in ways that are designed to promote their safety and uplift our values as Americans, as opposed to what we're seeing right now from ICE, which is that they're using taxpayer dollars to inflict brutality on the American people. And in the instance of Renee Nicole Good, killing an American citizen in cold blood. Thanks. Back to this side. So.
Thank you, Leader. I want to get your thoughts on protesters going into a church in Minnesota during worship hours. Is that okay? Do you support that? Especially when one person who was involved with that was Don Lemon, who's been a guest of yours on the Hill before.
I haven't followed that particular situation, so I'm not really in a position to comment on the specifics there. What I will say is, as someone myself who's grown up in the Baptist Church, continue to be an active member of Cornerstone Baptist Church, come from a deeply religious community, I think across the board, we all should respect houses of worship. Churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, let's all respect houses of worship. We can agree to disagree on a whole host of issues, and we should disagree strongly with the extremism that we're seeing unleashed on the American people by Donald Trump, his administration, the attacks on health care, the attacks on the economy, and the attacks on law-abiding immigrant families. We should disagree with those things with righteous indignation, and not being familiar with the specifics of what may have happened in Minneapolis. I certainly believe that all of us, consistent with the First Amendment and freedom of religion, should respect houses of worship. Thanks.
Just to push a little bit further on ICE, I mean, you talk about accountability, and you say in this joint statement that you just put out that you've tried to push for different accountability measures, but they keep getting rejected by Republicans. You're obviously encouraging your members to oppose DHS funding, yet Speaker Johnson is saying he believes he has the vote. So really, what more can Democrats do to hold ICE's feet to the fire?
Well, what's in front of us right now is the fight around the appropriations bill, and as we indicated in our statement, the American people deserve an immigration and customs enforcement agency that conducts itself in a manner consistent with every other law enforcement agency in the country. That is not too much to ask in the United States of America. But ICE is totally out of control, using taxpayer dollars to brutalize American citizens and law-abiding immigrant families. So what we will continue to press are common sense changes that should be mandated as part of the law, including but not limited to judicial warrant requirements before American citizens can be seized out of their home or while driving to and from work or picking up their children from school. We believe that body cameras should be mandated, as is the case with every other major law enforcement organization across the country. There should be an explicit prohibition on the excessive use of force, and the law should be made clear that no one in this country is above the law, and therefore ICE agents who break the law don't have absolute immunity. We believe there should be a prohibition that's explicit in the law that prohibits ICE from being able to storm churches, synagogues, mosques, houses of worship, hospitals, and schools. Let's start there. That's consistent with prohibitions that exist or protocols that exist connected to every other major law enforcement agency in the country. Why should ICE be conducting itself any differently? And there definitively should be a ban on masks and an explicit prohibition that would prevent ICE from detaining or deporting American citizens. These are the things that we will continue to push for today, tomorrow, this week, next week, this month, next month, until ICE is brought under control.
Leader Jeffries.
You, middle, sorry, yeah.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Leader.
All three of you raised your hand at the same time, so I was a little confused and thrown off.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. I wanted to know, so today the House, as part of the spending bill package you guys are voting on, you guys are actually increasing, or you would increase the budget that's going to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And that is a rejection of the cuts that the White House wants to do on a lot of thousands of housing programs. What does it say about your colleagues across the aisle that they're willing to go against Trump's wishes on that?
Well, the provision as it relates to increasing funding for the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and particularly as it relates to affordable housing initiatives, is a big win for the American people, achieved by House Democrats, partnering with Senate Democrats, who are fighting hard to lower the high cost of living. And we know that housing costs are out of control in this country. Donald Trump basically wants to eliminate the Department of Housing and Urban Development and affordable housing programs. We know this to be the case. And the so-called HUD secretary is deeply unqualified. I don't even know the dude's name. That's how irrelevant he is in terms of policy making at this point in time. And basically he's undermining his own agency. And so Democrats and Republicans who have joined us, I think now recognize, particularly after Republicans were decimated and crushed electorally in the midst of the longest government shutdown in American history that they caused, and then were losing races all across the country up and down the ballot, that they need perhaps to partner with Democrats who are leading the way on dealing with the affordability crisis in this country. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why we were successful, led by Rosa DeLauro and Jim Clyburn, who's the top Democrat on the HUD Transportation Subcommittee, in achieving this important victory for the American people. More than $40 billion in increased funds for the mission of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, designed to ease the crushing housing burden as it relates to costs on the American people. Thanks. Thank you. Really active group today. Going back.
Thank you. Yesterday, 9 House Democrats voted with Republicans to hold former President Bill Clinton in contempt. Were you or your team trying to advise those members not to vote on contempt, and what is your position on whether the Clintons should be held in contempt?
I strongly support the position of Robert Garcia and Jamie Raskin, and have indicated that publicly, and also in my conversations with any member who has asked for my perspective on this issue before the committee. When it gets to the floor, if we need to have a broader caucus-wide conversation about it, we will. And my position remains unchanged. And it's the same position that is held by Robert Garcia, Jamie Raskin, Nancy Pelosi, and many others, which is to the extent that anyone in this town or country should be held in criminal contempt, it is the Attorney General of the Department of Justice or the Deputy Attorney General or whoever within the Department of Justice is responsible at this point for violating the law, which requires millions of documents that the Department of Justice has refused to release without justification. In other words, there are more than 5 million documents within the Epstein files that the Department of Justice currently is under a legal obligation to share with the American people, consistent with the wishes of the brave, courageous Epstein survivors, and consistent with the law that Donald Trump signed. The Department of Justice was supposed to release those documents, 5 million documents, by December 19th. More than a month has passed. And the Republicans have shown no interest in actually compelling the Department of Justice to do what they are legally obligated to do at this period of time. That sounds to me like contempt. And we should start there.
Do you think the Clintons have questions to answer for?
I think that the Clintons are working in good faith to try to reach an accommodation with the Oversight Committee in order to sit down and offer their testimony, which is part of the reason why, in my view, the effort by James Comer lacks any credibility, because it has always been congressional practice that if someone's under subpoena, you work to find a reasonable accommodation in order to receive their testimony. Now, James Comer subpoenaed more than 10 different individuals, and he's released every single one of those individuals, including 8 members of law enforcement, like Christopher Wray, the former FBI director, who was the FBI director when Jeffrey Epstein was in custody and ultimately killed himself. And Christopher Wray and all of these other individuals were able to say to the committee they had no information. Very similar statement that the Clintons made. And Christopher Wray and all of these other Trump administration officials were released from any obligation to show up. And yet James Comer demands, even in the midst of good faith negotiation, that the former president and the former Secretary of State and First Lady show up. Why? Why did he make that demand and treat them differently than every other person who was under the same subpoena, who were actually part of the Trump Justice Department when all of this stuff unfolded? And so, again, I share the same position that Robert Garcia and Jamie Raskin hold, and hopefully there'll be some resolution to this in the next week or so. But if Comer tries to bring this resolution, he wants to lock Hillary Clinton up, consistent with what Donald Trump's been saying now for 10 years, lock her up, as opposed to actually focusing on the things that matter for the American people, then we'll deal with it appropriately. Thanks. Oh, yeah. Okay.
On Judge Perlman's decision in the New York court, I spoke to Mike Lawler, and he characterized this as a partisan exercise. He accused you of corrupting the New York courts. Should we expect
I didn't know I had that much power.
Should we expect partisan gerrymandering in New York?
What you should continue to expect is that Democrats are going to fight for a fair national congressional map. Period, full stop. We told everyone this when we first came through this moment. Told everyone this. But for whatever the reason, people were skeptical about the Democratic capacity and willingness and ability to fight back. Republicans started this gerrymandering fight. Democrats are going to end it. I'm looking forward to my meeting later on today with Governor Wes Moore. The people of Virginia are going to have an opportunity to vote on a fair map in the Commonwealth in the next few months. We're going to fight back against the effort by Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, and Florida Republicans to gerrymander the congressional map in a state where the map is already gerrymandered. And this is not going to end well for Donald Trump Republicans and the extremists.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Included in this new minibus funding bill is $5 billion for refugee welfare programs. Amid this affordability crisis that you speak of, why is it the responsibility of the taxpayers to pay for refugees when we have a homeless and unemployment crisis around here?
I think that's the question that you're going to have to ask Speaker Mike Johnson and the Republican chair of the Appropriations Committee, Tom Cole.
Several of your members are planning to vote for the DHS funding bill. Does that undermine the argument that you just made and that many of your members have made that ICE is out of control and needs to be reined in?
I think you have to ask every individual member who's going to vote the best interest of their district why they've chosen to vote one way or the other.
Thank you, Leader Jeffries. Do you have any concerns about voting no on that DHS funding bill, given that DHS obviously isn't just ICE, it's also TSA agents, FEMA, particularly ahead of what's projected to be a pretty big snowstorm hitting the country this weekend?
Yeah, we will continue to support FEMA. We will continue to support the Coast Guard. We will certainly continue to support the TSA, but we are not in a position to support the lawless behavior by ICE to use taxpayer dollars to brutalize American citizens. Thanks.
All these appropriations bills are going to be sewn together into one giant package sent to the Senate. Are you urging Senate Democrats to oppose that whole package over ICE?
Well, the Senate Democrats are going to have to evaluate the totality of the package, which is what they will do. And as I've documented in my conversation here today, and as is clear and obvious, a lot of progress has been made within the appropriations process for the American people in terms of addressing issues of concern. Be those issues related to the quality of life of working class Americans, middle class Americans, and everyday Americans, as well as our national security concerns and standing up for our military. It's the reason why, in terms of what's going to be before us in the House of Representatives, I'm going to support the 3 bills related to labor, health care, transportation, infrastructure, and defense. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. So kind of to Andrew's question, some of your members are going to be voting to fund DHS with this upcoming bill. Is the Democratic tent big enough for all of these members? And you put out that joint statement with leadership saying you're going to vote against this. Are you comfortable with your members pushing back on that?
Here's the interesting thing about kind of where we find ourselves. I don't know what's unclear about this. Republicans are losing. Their policies have been a disaster for the American people. the economy is falling apart in terms of the affordability crisis and the Republican refusal to drive down the high cost of living, which is what they promised they were going to do on day one. We now are past year one, and things aren't getting better for the American people, they're getting worse. Donald Trump and Republicans have created a healthcare crisis that is devastating to everyday Americans, yet they can find $40 billion to bail out Argentina, spend billions of dollars trying to run Venezuela when Donald Trump and his administration don't even know how to run the United States of America, but they can't find a dime to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, which means tens of millions of people, as we speak, are at risk of being unable to go see a doctor when they need one. So from a value standpoint, Democrats are standing on the side of the American people, and Republicans are standing on the side of their billionaire donors. Because all they care about, Republican extremists at the end of the day, are massive tax breaks for their billionaire donors and subsidizing the lifestyles of the rich and shameless, the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. Now, as Democrats, our view of governing is clear. Unity is different than unanimity. In a representative democracy, the democracy that the framers of the Constitution and the founders of this country gave us 250 years ago, in a representative democracy, you're never going to achieve unanimity on every single issue if it's functioning the right way. You get unanimity when you have a cult. And that's what we have on the other side. Cult-like behavior. But we're not a cult as Democrats, we're a coalition. And so we strive for unity. And when it comes to the issues that matter for the American people, beginning with driving down the high cost of living and fixing our broken healthcare system and cleaning up corruption so we deliver a country that allows every single American who works hard and plays by the rules to be able to live an affordable life, a comfortable life, and the good life. Not too much to ask for. Good paying job, good housing, good health care, good education for your children, and a good retirement. Democrats are completely and totally unified in fighting to make life better for the American people. Thank you, everyone.